It's my favorite time of the year, October, and like many of you, I don't wait until the end of the month to celebrate Halloween. On ML Miller Frights, we celebrate horror all year long, but we party extra hard in October. This is my 13th annual countdown of the best in horror. Most countdowns do their best of the year in January, but I feel that celebrating the best in horror during the month of October is much more appropriate. This is ML Miller Frights Best in Horror Countdown 2022-2023. All through October, I'll be posting reviews of films in the horror genre that I feel were the best I've experienced between October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. As an added bonus, I'll be adding a secondary review that may be somewhat related to the main review or sometimes just missed the countdown by inches. Before we begin with number 31, I wanted to answer a few questions that always seem to come up during these countdowns. Number 1, the cutoff point is strictly September 30th, so you won't see reviews of Exorcist Believer or Five Nights at Freddy's or any other films released this month. Most likely I'll cover them, and if they're good, they'll show up in next year's countdown. Number 2, the secondary reviews are not in order counting down to the best. They're just good and notable films that have something to do with the main countdown review. Think of them as a suggested double feature. Number 3, if you're curious about how I make these lists, I begin the list starting October 1st of that year and add and subtract to it as the year goes on. For me, what stands out the most is something I haven't seen before. Number 4, I do not count films I've seen at advanced screenings or at festivals. Nothing annoys me more than a pretentious critic who puts films that aren't available to the masses on streaming, on demand, or Blu-ray DVD in their best of lists. I don't really go for that elitist crap. Every film in this countdown can be seen somehow right now. Number 5, these are simply my opinions based on my own personal sick and twisted tastes, not box office or critic ratings. I don't really give a crap about how much money the film makes or what Rotten Tomatoes says. It's just a list of horror movies that stood out to me as the best. Finally, I really want this channel to grow, so please spread the word about this countdown. Give it a like. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and ring the bell for notifications. It costs nothing, it takes seconds to do, and that way you'll never miss a new post, and it'll help me out too. Alright, let's get started with the countdown.
Number 31.
That's a Wrap was released on August 25th, 2023. It's available on demand from Quiver Distribution. It's directed by Marcel Walz and written by Joe Knetter and Robert L. Lucas. When a movie named That's a Wrap finishes its filming and cuts a teaser, the director, Mason Maestro, played by Robert Donovan, and his wife and producer Lily, played by Monique T. Parent, throw a wrap party with all of the cast. But when the killer of the movie shows up, the cast is murdered in the really real world in a case of life imitating art. Though she survived as the final girl in the movie, Harper, played by Sarah French, doesn't know if she'll survive the night. That's a Wrap is Scream with a little stank on it. It's got just enough over-the-top gore, unbridled sex, raunchy humor, and unexpected twists and turns to make those who only like Hollywood horror cringe, but it makes it so much more entertaining in my book. Writers Joe Knetter and Robert L. Lucas deliver a very clever script that is self-referential, but keeps from being stale and looking down on the genre it's talking about. You see, I always felt Scream turned their nose up on the very slasher films the series was birthed from, often snarkily pointing out the bad cliches that true horror fans grew up loving, but those in the movie acted as if they were better than that. In Scream, when a well-worn trope comes up, a snarky remark is shat out by one of the over-plasticized stars, garnering a chuckle from the crowd. But that's what makes That's a Wrap so different. It cleverly points out the cliches by having a party the cast is experiencing play out just like the movie they just completed. To clarify, there's a scene where one of the female stars asks another how she can appear nude on film, to which the actress gives a little insight about feeling comfortable with her own body and doesn't think that it's a very bad thing. Later in the film, that same actress, the shapely and beautiful Sarah Polednek, has a drink spilled on her dress, forcing her to go to the bathroom and take off her dress, thus appearing nude right before she is killed in a shower scene reminiscent of Psycho. While Scream puts down the genre, That's a Wrap celebrates it, and damn it if this movie isn't filled with tons of clever little scenes like that one. But on top of all of that clever scripting, That's a Wrap also manages to have some fantastically unique and bloody death scenes, again all of them relating to previous dialogue in the film. One cast member talks about having to, shall we say, get down on her knees and say ah for the roles that she's played, and later, let's just say she gets something jammed down her throat in a death scene that you'll be talking about for days later. The entire set is lit with vivid lighting reminiscent of some of the more stylish giallos. The giallo homage continues with the black-gloved and masked killer who literally paints the walls with blood in some scenes. Director Marcel Walz does a fantastic job of making everything look vibrant and gruesome on what looks to be a pretty small set. That's a Wrap may not have ripped its cast from the WB, but still manages to deliver some really good performances. First and foremost, Monique T. Parent delivers her best role probably ever. The Scream Queen and Skinamax staple is best known for her curves and willingness to bear all, but here she's given a role with an extreme amount of depth. There's a conversation between her and Sarah French about women's roles in horror and women being their own worst enemy that are pretty profound. French is also strong here as the final girl, even though the story seems to give everyone their time to shine, and her moment is, of course, as the final girl later in the movie. Robert Donovan is equal parts sleazy and goofy as the director. Smaller roles from Ghost World's David Sheridan and Cabin Fever's Serena Vincent can be found as well, with Vincent playing the Scream-esque Drew Barrymore role exquisitely well in the opening reel. I really loved this movie from beginning to end. Waltz was responsible for the good-looking but somewhat messy Loverboy movie from a while back, but with That's a Wrap, Waltz's talented eye is paired with a much stronger script, and the result is the Scream movie true horror fans have been drooling for. I liked Scream 6, but for my money, I prefer the lower budget look and feel of That's a Wrap that seems like it actually respects the genre it's paying homage to in a much more genuine and sincere way. This is a lower budget movie, so be warned, it doesn't have all the glitz and glamour of the Scream series, but while that series seems to have dialed down the meta and gone straight up slasher, That's a Wrap actually finds fresh and fun ways to honor the slasher film. While I had a lot of criticisms for the Scream franchise, I did like the latest entry, Scream 6. Not enough to make it on the main countdown, but I do think it was worth noting. So here's my review. Scream 6 was released in theaters March 10th, 2023. It's streaming on Paramount+. It's directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, and written by James Vanderbilt, Guy Busick, from characters created by Kevin Williamson. Sam, played by Melissa Barrera, and her sister Tara, played by Jenna Ortega, have followed their friends and fellow survivors of the last massacre at Woodsboro to go to school in New York. While Sam has become secretive and reclusive after the attack, Tara refused to let the bad guys win and is trying to live her life with no worries or F's given. Sam is overprotective of Tara, which pushes her away from her all the more. Sam is also being blamed for the deaths that occurred in the last film because she's the daughter of Billy Loomis, played by Skeet Ulrich, one of the murderers from the first Scream film, and the girlfriend of the killer from the last film. She should have known, it's always the boyfriend. When the murders begin again, by a cloaked person wearing a ghost-faced mask and using the killer's usual cell phone motif, Sam, Tara, and their friends are again running for their lives, except this time through the streets of New York City. While I'll refrain from doing a best to worst Scream comparison, maybe I'll do one later, I will say I feel Scream 6 is much better than the previous entry. If you liked what Radio Silence, Ortega, and Barrera offered up in the last one, you'll get all that and a bit more in this new one. The filmmakers realized that their previous film was less reliant on the chase scene, so they added in quite a few nicely constructed scenes occurring through the streets of New York, and also added some original set pieces that the series hasn't really used before. There's a wonderfully filmed scene, reminiscent of Rear Window and scores of other films after it, where a murder is occurring from another building and someone witnesses it and is frantically trying to warn them about the killer. Edited crisply, this was one of the more tension-filled scenes of the movie, with the subway scene a close second as the tensest scene you'll find in this film. I also have to give credit for the team coming up with an opening that manages to feel fresh in this, the sixth installment of the franchise. Yes, there is another Drew Barrymore damsel talking on the phone, but this time it's the stunning Samara Weaving who starred in Radio Silence's Ready or Not. And the way the opener plays out really works well as something slightly different from the norm. The final set piece, made up as some sort of shrine to all of the Scream killers who have come before, serves its purpose as its repurposed movie theater, which itself is a nice incentive to see this film in the theater for a more meta experience. Now let's look at some of the things I felt were addressed since the last installment. The acting is better, and having a movie refer back to its leads works well to make this new generation of Scream cast members feel more lived in. I wasn't bowled over with Melissa Barrera in the fifth one, and felt she was reading lines rather than feeling the character. Her Sam has much more to work with here, and there's a nice evolution for her character that I hope we'll see more of in the eventual next one. She's much more nuanced and darker in Scream 6, and works well with Jenna Ortega, not letting the Little Wednesday star overshadow her with her newfound superstardom. Ortega also plays a rather complex character, and the two cinematic sisters get some nice growth to their relationship. The rest of the cast is hit and miss. Returning characters, Mindy, played by Jasmine Savoy Brown, and Chad, played by Mason Gooding, are okay, but I feel both of these actors need a little bit more time in the acting pressure cooker to deliver lines on the level of their co-stars. These two are supposedly the niece and nephew of Randy, played in the original by Jamie Kennedy, so of course she provides a lot of the self-referential and meta-commentary. More on this later. The other returning characters deliver their lines capably, but just sort of exist in this franchise for nostalgia's sake. I'm talking about walking skeleton Courtney Cox, who plays reporter/writer Gail Weathers, and the missing person since Heroes Hayden Panettiere, who plays the horror movie addicted Kirby, who has now become an FBI agent specializing in Ghostface killings and their copycats. Panettiere gets more to work with here with less screen time, as she has a fun debate with Mindy about their favorite scary movies and serves as an interesting suspect for the killings. While she has aged, she hasn't really gone down the troubled, over-plastic surgeried highway many aging actresses descend into. Cox, on the other hand, well, to put it kindly, I really think she should just take it easy. I know with the death of Dewey in the last one, there aren't many of the original cast members left, but she has no real purpose other than being a potential victim in this new installment. They don't even give Cox some time to mourn Dewey's death, a character development that I would have welcomed and would have thought have been more important to this series. Like Neve Campbell, I wish she would have sat this one out. And again, it pains me to see how much work the actress has done to herself and how worse it gets from one film to the next. Some of the new cast members are okay. Though she simply serves as the other lesbian and not much else, Devin Nakota does seem to be a pretty strong actress. I also really liked Liana Liberato's aloof, sexually liberated Quinn, who sleeps with a lot of guys and wears it like a badge of honor. You might remember her from The Beach House from a few years ago. Finally, Dermot Mulroney delivers probably one of the most hammiest performances he's done since Dirty Steve in Young Guns, as the police officer attached to the case and the father of Quinn. One of the things I noticed was that the meta-commentary has been whittled down to as small as it can possibly get. While there are some fun homages to horror lore, I especially liked the Jason Takes Manhattan nod, and there is some fun movie banter going on between Kirby and Mindy, who I guarantee will be set up together in the next film. The traditional setting up of the rules of the movie scene is one of the weaker of this movie. At this point, Scream is as much of a cliché as the rest of the horror genre, so as a result, it references itself, more so than the horror genre it fits into. While Scream 5 felt it was a tribute to the first film, in many ways, Scream 6 is a tribute to Scream 2, with its better chase sequences and other details that would get into spoiler territory if I talked about them, so I won't. With all the references to Billy Loomis, the series has become a snake eating its own tail. The reveal works. It's fun because the shrine/movie theater setting gives the characters a nice dramatic place to play out the climax. It's goofy, and of course the characters, who were once supposed to be allies, are now gleeful psychos, but this is as common in the Scream series as unmaskings are in the Friday the 13th series. I wasn't mad at it once the killers were revealed, and they actually seemed to pose a real physical challenge to the group of heroes. That said, I guessed who the killer was pretty early on. My biggest gripe with Scream 6 is the same thing I pointed out in Scream 5, that being that everyone in this film who has survived one movie to the next should be shitting in a bag for the rest of their lives. The entire group of survivors, and there's a lot of them, takes extensive knife damage to their stomachs. But because Quentin Tarantino said that it takes a long time for someone to bleed out from a gut wound 30 years ago, Hollywood basically has accepted the fact that no matter how much rearranging of organs with a Rambo knife there is, all the survivors need is an aluminum shock blanket and an ace bandage to live on for the next movie. Hell, a handful of survivors have taken multiple deep wounds to their torso, yet have cheated death, gotten sewn back up, and will most definitely be ready to sprint, screw, and take their shirts off to reveal rock-hard abs in the next one. It's well past the point of parody and makes me slap my head every time I see it. It's just gotten ridiculous. The other problems is that the cast of people with plot armor has grown to a size that is extremely cumbersome. The reason the first few films began to falter was the hurdles that needed to be leapt in order to give all of the survivors something to do in the movie. It's grown to twice that size by the end of this one. Hopefully, some of these survivors will get cacked for good in the next one. I'm all for another. This is by far one of the most effective films at doing what these films do that we've gotten in a long time. Scream 6 definitely has some ridiculous moments, but it also retains a freshness that a lot of horror franchises have failed to achieve at this point in their series. Bring back radio silence, and bring on Scream, or whatever the hell they're going to call the next one.
As always, feel free to agree, disagree, or give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies. It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of the pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.